We live in an age where many people are deconstructing their faith. And often we focus on the deconstructing part of that little phrase there. And we think about, French postmodern philosophy and the influence that has had as a philosophical framework for us to begin to know how to deconstruct a worldview and to put everything under a microscope and see everything is relative and all these things. But I actually want to focus on the last part of that phrase, on faith. What is faith? How do we understand faith? What is it that is being deconstructed in the first place? Because I think after the Enlightenment, we often see faith as something that you need to be able to prove in the same way that you prove a fact. We think of it as maybe belief. But I think that when we think about what biblical faith is, we actually need to go a layer deeper than that, and we need to realize that it's much more something that is embodied than we realize. So let's think first of all about who is called the father of faith, Abraham, in the Bible. And Abraham had this promise, he was going to have a son, and he held on to that promise. He got old, the promise didn't arrive, and then eventually he began to doubt a little bit. And then eventually he tried to control the situation. He took matters into his own hand, and he had a son completely against the way that God had told him it was going to happen. But the reason, if you think about it, that him and Sarah did that was because there was still something in them of holding on to the hope of that promise. Otherwise, they wouldn't have tried to make it happen themselves. They would have just given up on it. So Abraham had this thing deep inside of him that despite his many obvious failings, he kept having hope in spite of that. So the father of faith in Scripture is not perfect, but he is holding on to a promise and not letting go. And so that is true faith. It's holding on to something and not letting go. And maybe you're doubting God, and even me saying that, you're like, well, of course you would say that if you're a Christian because you want me to have this kind of blind faith and just believe it anyway. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't use our reason and our intellect in how we come to understand and think about God. And the reality is that Christians have been doing that for many, many years at this point. But that isn't the thing that is going to, I would argue, keep you from having or not having faith. I think that actually it's connected to something of holding on to a promise of something, and whether you stop believing in that promise or if you decide to keep believing in it. So I think when we situate the conversation as make or break being about an intellectual argument for God's existence, we're actually placing it in the wrong place. And feel free to disagree with that statement if you like, but this is just the argument that I'm putting forward, and I'm going to draw upon the work of Soren Kierkegaard in order to make that argument. So Kierkegaard has a concept of the night of faith, and this is in the book Fear and Trembling, where he's really reflecting on the situation where God tells Abraham, so Isaac, his son, the son of the promise, has been born, and God tells him, go and sacrifice him. And obviously this is a passage that I'm sure many of us have questions about and have wrestled with. And I would encourage you to read Fear and Trembling if you want to have some thoughtful kind of explorations of that. But I'm actually going to read a bit further on when he starts talking about the night of faith. And when we think of a knight, we think of someone on a horse, a strong warrior who is accomplished and able to withstand things. But it's interesting when you read Kierkegaard's description of who the knight of faith is. He's kind of describing an imaginary meeting that he has with someone who he describes as a knight of faith. He belongs entirely to the world. No bourgeois Philistine could belong to it more than he. There is none of that distant and distinguished air by which one recognizes the night of the infinite. He takes delight in everything, takes part in everything, and every time one sees him participate in something, he does it with a diligence typical of the worldly person whose soul is engrossed with such things. He attends to his work. When one looks at him, one would think he was a scrivener who had given his soul to double-entry bookkeeping, so meticulous is he. He takes time off on Sundays. He goes to church. He discloses no heavenly gaze, nor does he betray any sign of the incommensurable. If one did not know him, it would be impossible to distinguish him from the rest of the crowd, for his powerful hymn-singing attests, at most, to his healthy lungs. In the afternoon, he goes for a walk in the forest. He takes delight in everything he sees. It's interesting, isn't it, that the knight of faith that Kierkegaard is describing, this kind of warrior of the faith, if you like, sounds like a very ordinary person who is just living in light of a promise that they believe is to come. And this leads me to my definition of faith, which is faith is hope embodied. And when we talk about hope in the Christian framework, we are thinking about a promise of something that is to come. So specifically with what Scripture reveals, the promise of a new creation, a new heavens and a new earth, and a place where every tear is wiped away, where there's no more pain or crying or death. Evil is defeated and justice has finally been done, and God lives amongst human beings. So faith is taking that hope and embodying it in the here and now, living in light of a promise of what is to come. And it may seem stupid to many people. It may seem ludicrous. It may seem like the world is heading in a completely opposite direction to that. It may be that you doubt. It may be that you make many, many mistakes. But something inside of you will not let go of that promise that is to come. And so you go to church, you attend to the things that are in front of you, you do your work diligently because you believe that this life is going somewhere. And that is what faith is. And I want to speak to you if you're someone who is doubting or finding it difficult in your faith somehow. If there is something in you, even if we just think about a story with a happy ending, that all of us love a good happy ending in a story, if there's something in you that thinks that must speak to something of reality, and I want to live in a way where my life says there is a happy ever after to come, that is legitimate, objective reality. If you can believe that, then you can hold on to faith. You can continue to attend church and to sing the songs at the top of your lungs, even if you're not very good, because you believe in something that is bigger than yourself, bigger than anything that your tiny little human mind could ever comprehend anyway. You hold on to a promise that is so much bigger than you. You know, the writer of Hebrews says that hope is like an anchor for our souls. It's like it's anchored there in the future reality of what is to come. And faith is like that rope that we have to us today that we don't, it's in the dark. We don't know exactly where it's going, but we hold on to it and we continue to take steps forward with everything within us, hoping and longing for that new creation that is to come. The beauty of this present life, though, is that we can see taste of that new creation here and now. They might be fleeting, and I think there are many Christians that maybe have lived their whole life and never seen any glimpse or glimmer of the new creation. And to me, that inspires me in the world that we live in to keep going and keep believing. And it's why I'm so passionate about stories and our imagination, because these things allow us to take a step out of the present reality that we experience and to attend to something bigger than ourselves. So this understanding of faith actually doesn't take you away from this life. Notice how Kierkegaard describes the knight of faith as someone who is actually more present than even the most worldly person to things. Because it's hope embodied. You're bringing it into the everyday. Faith isn't about escaping from this world and taking yourself out from everything that you know, love and care about. It's being more present within those things and seeing how God's kingdom might come in those situations. So let me end by reading Hebrews 11 verse 1 for us today. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen.